Welcome, readers. I'm Karen Hostetter with Redland Community Library, and my co-facilitator this evening is Susan Nenstill from Kreitz Creek Library. We're both part of York County Libraries, and we are presenting the second in a series of talks on the 2020 Summer Read Selection, Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. This powerful, inspiring, and practical book focuses on building resilience and moving forward after life's inevitable setbacks, including the current COVID-19 crisis. A Summer Read is a collaboration of WITF's Transforming Health, WellSpan Health, and over 80 libraries in central Pennsylvania. For more information, visit transforminghealth.org. This evening's topic is becoming resilient and raising resilient kids. We will have a presentation followed by a question and answer session. You are welcome to put your comments in chat for discussion later. We will be sure to share them. Our presenter from WellSpan Health is Rachel Buchik, and she is an allied mental health professional serving the Lancaster County area. In her role, Rachel provides therapy and behavior education to caregivers and children in the home, the school, and the community. She leads caregiver education and support groups in York and nearby counties. These groups are offered free to the community by WellSpan Philhaven. Rachel has a deep passion for teaching caregivers parenting skills while working with children to focus on and build on their strengths. Let's meet Rachel.
Hello, and thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. Resiliency is something that I use every day in my practice as a therapist, and I find it really, really helpful to focus on strengths and finding ways for parents to build their own resiliency, and also for ways that we can build our children's resiliency. So as we're talking about resilience, what is resiliency? Resiliency in the Oxford definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. The American Psychological Association says the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family dynamics, health problems, workplace stress, and financial stressors. As much as it involves bouncing back, it can also involve profound personal growth. Resiliency is fluid and can be strengthened even before tragedy occurs, and Sheryl, in the book Option B, states building resilience can lead to happier, more successful, and healthier lives. So if we're looking at ways to build our own recovery or our own resiliency, we can look at Option B and how they present Martin Seligman's research, which identifies 3 Ps that can stunt growth and recovery: personalization, the belief that we are all at fault, thoughts like, if I only had done something differently, this wouldn't have happened. So we're blaming ourselves. Pervasiveness, the belief that an event will affect all areas of our life, and being able to acknowledge that not everything was horrible, but only parts of our life after significant pain or loss. So moving on in some areas of our life, even though other areas have been affected. And permanence, the belief that the aftershocks of the event will last forever, especially immediately after the event. Vocabulary like never and always can be transitioned into things such as lately or sometimes. Acknowledging these Ps and processing them will help us improve our ability to recover. There is evidence that being able to talk about traumatic events and using expressive writing helps people communicate their pain, feel understood, and improve their healing. For more on positive psychology by Martin Seligman, you can look up, he has some great TED Talks on positive psychology, and you can tap into those anytime on YouTube. And it kind of furthers that idea of what positive psychology is, how we build on strengths, and how we find resiliency. So building resiliency in our own lives. We have a couple of ways that we do that. First is building self-confidence and self-compassion. It's okay that I'm here. I can get myself out of this by taking small steps, believing in ourselves that we can make small changes that can lead to bigger changes. So believing that we're capable of those small things, and then those things become bigger things. Sheryl uses the analogy of skiing down a difficult slope and that she didn't choose. So she's up on top of the mountain and she's on top of this very, very steep hill and she's terrified. And her mother helps her focus on just the first turn, then you take the next turn. And all of these small steps and small turns for her helped her get over something really big. And so that same analogy can work in our own lives. How can we take small steps to create something bigger? To build self-confidence, write things that you've done every day that you've accomplished and do this daily. That helps us have a feeling of contribution. Listing small contributions each day is effective in feeling valuable. Listing what we are grateful for can be passive and less impactful on what we can do to change. While it is important to be grateful and recognize what we have to put things in perspective, listing contributions makes a larger impact on our feelings of self-worth because we feel as though we can make a difference through our actions. The next way is to pay attention to the joy in our life. When we go through tragedy or stress, we can often feel guilt or sadness. Survivor's guilt happens when close family members die or when coworkers are laid off, and sometimes we feel a burden that it should have been us. We can also avoid or feel guilty about finding joy again because of the loss we've gone through. Sheryl talks about this a little bit in the book whenever she first has the opportunity to dance again, and she's overwhelmed with guilt because that was the first time she felt joy since losing Dave. Gradually bringing things that bring your joy back into your life will make a great impact on your ability to recover from tragedy or stress and grow. Rather than avoiding activities that once made you happy because they remind you of people you lost or traumatic events, find ways to bring them back into your life, but slowly. Sheryl describes this as taking it back, allowing her and her family to enjoy activities they used to do with Dave when he was alive, and to bring happiness back into their life and memories of Dave back into their life so that he was still a part of their everyday. Also, we have rely on relationships. Relationships are essential in working through stress and pain. We need to communicate our thoughts and feelings to be heard, to be understood, and to heal. Accepting help from others is hard, and we can have some guilt with that, but very important to build our community and our support. Building positive relationships through balancing listening and talking with others. Allow friends to provide you help and provide help to them. Helping others can help us distract from the sadness and replace it with service and feelings of value. Relationships may also be related to faith and trusting your faith to get through stress and pain, releasing control to a greater power, and trusting the process of healing based on whatever that path is for your faith. We also need to acknowledge the possibility of growth. Oftentimes in therapy, we try to look at both and. Things can be both tragic and an opportunity for growth. The pandemic can be both tragic and an opportunity for simplifying our lives and bonding with family, nature, and the things closest to us. We can both suffer and experience growth, and we must open ourselves to this possibility of growth to really be able to find it. Over half of the people who experience trauma can find an area of growth after going through that traumatic event, compared to just 15% of people who will live with PTSD. If we remember the theory of positive psychology building on strengths, we can understand how Tedeschi and Calhoun highlight areas of growth that can happen after trauma, such as finding personal strength, gaining appreciation, forming deeper relationships, discovering more meaning in life, and seeing new possibilities. Tedeschi and Calhoun note, "I am more valuable than I thought, but much stronger than I ever imagined." Now that we've covered the ways option B discusses how we increase resiliency in ourselves, we're going to focus on building resiliency in children. Please remember that we must take care of ourselves to take care of our children. Oftentimes in therapy, we use the analogy of an airplane, and they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can take care of the people around you, because you can't take care of them if you're dead. So ways to be able to build your own resiliency is important so that then you can take care of others and be strong in that support. So building resiliency in children. When Sheryl Sandberg first lost her husband, her immediate concern was, her children and how they would get through this. Adam Grant reassured her many children are surprisingly resilient. Building resiliency depends on the opportunities children have and the relationships they form with parents, caregivers, teachers, and friends. There are many examples of this in option B to dive deeper, and many, many research studies that will support this idea as well. The 4 core beliefs is that children have to have some kind of control over their life. They have to be able to learn from failure. They matter as human beings, and they have strength to rely on and share. So having some control. Sheryl uses a heartwarming story about a man named Tim who had shown resiliency when he was bullied as a child. When asked how he was able to show resiliency, Tim said he was taught by his father to reframe situations. So when Tim reframed the situation by changing how he responded to feeling embarrassment from other children making fun of him, he turned it into humor, and he gained control over the situation. Children were redirected into a more positive interaction with Tim through Tim's behavior. So Tim was able to take that situation of feeling bullied and turn it into something where he was able to laugh with the person that was attacking him. The most resilient ones realize they have a power to shape their own lives. As caregivers communicate clear and consistent expectations, giving them structure and predictability, which increases their sense of control. As a child therapist, one of the main things that I teach parents is that we need to have routines and consistency because children understand what to expect and they feel a greater control over their environment. And this is the same thing that they're talking about in option B. Control can provide a sense of hope. Setting goals and taking small steps to meet those goals is very empowering for children, and it's important for them to have those opportunities. Loss of control could lead to anxiety in children, fear of the future, and the unknown. Next, we're going to talk about how we learn from failures. Having a growth mindset compared to a fixed mindset can make a large difference in how children interpret their abilities. With a growth mindset, children understand that they will grow and learn how to accomplish something. There is no, I'm not good at math, but instead they say, I'm having a hard time with math right now, but if I keep working hard, I will get a better grade on my test. This type of focus puts it on the work, and the work is really what's going to improve the child's experience with math rather than the innate ability or character trait that is fixed. So this type of mindset will develop based on what kind of praise they receive from parents and teachers, and this then influences the effort they put into it. So they actually had a research study in option B that they talked about. And fixed mindset comes from, you're smart. And when the children are then tested again, they put very little effort into it because they thought they were naturally smart. But in the growth mindset, children were told, you practice a lot to get good grades. So they were praised for their effort. That then reinforced the effort the next time they took the test. And they put a much larger effort on the next test, and they did much better. And so they reinforce the process. Fear of failure for a lot of children can create perfectionism in them, and again, it increases anxiety. It can look like 2 ways. It can be a child avoiding something because they're afraid they won't be perfect in that activity. Sometimes that can be homework. Sometimes it could be an activity or sport. And the other way is to just continue to attempt it over and over and over again until perfection is met. Okay, so the other way for building resilience in children is letting them know that they matter as human beings. So typically this is natural for a parent, listening to your child, valuing their ideas, helping them create strong, secure attachments with others. Sheryl and Adam point out, when any child is bullied, it communicates that you're worthless. But when someone is intentional about spending time with a child, they feel valued. 15 minutes of one-on-one time with each child a day really helps build that bond that you have with your child. It communicates value and strengthens your relationship with them. If children speak up, make sure we listen, acknowledge what they're saying, acknowledge their feelings, and validate them that it's okay to feel that way. When we do that, we're increasing their ability to communicate how they are feeling with us, and we're bridging that communication that's going to be important as they grow older and more mature. Sheryl points out that mattering to stigmatized groups is a challenge, especially when there are laws against them. LGBTQ children are 4 times more likely than their peers to attempt suicide. So when children are not feeling like they matter as human beings, whether it's because they are not getting attention from their parents, they're not getting time from their parents, or they're a part of a group that is a larger stigmatized group, there's a higher rate of suicidality. And the last one is that we need to make sure that children understand that they have strengths that they can rely on and that they can share. Helping children identify their own strengths is critical. With support and beliefs in these strengths, action and self-fulfillment occur. Often in my work as a therapist, one of the things we do in our assessment is explore strengths and find ways to build on those strengths. We find ways to use those strengths to turn them into relationships, into community supports, into hobbies, talents, vocational skills. Resiliency is defined as using internal strengths to manage lives. And when we prioritize strengths, we build resiliency. Strengths listed in the assessment that I use includes family involvement, talents and hobbies, vocational skills, resourcefulness, inclusion in their culture, spiritual and religious beliefs, optimism, well-being, educational supports, interpersonal relationships, and relationship permanence. This assessment that we use is called the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths, and it's because strengths are just as important as what a child needs. And when we focus on those strengths, then we can build resiliency in them. Okay. We do have tips for listeners. Do we want to jump to that, Abby, or do we have something else for the next part? Sorry, I was looking at mine.
I can go ahead and share those if you'd like.
Okay.
So just to review, thank you, Rachel, so much for sharing with us today. Your expertise, I'm sure we all took away lots of great information there, but we do want to go back and highlight again, what I really appreciate about Rachel's presentation this evening is that she really built into that what Sheryl had to tell us from option B and how that fits with our resiliency and the resiliency of our kids. So we just want to one more time highlight what those topics were and give you some tools and tips. And while we're doing that, if you have any questions for Rachel or for any of the other panelists, please feel free, go ahead and type your messages in the chat box. Especially if you have an experience that you'd like to share with us, a time that something either went very well or that you found out that something really didn't work for your children, especially if you have more than one child and it worked great for one and didn't work for the other. So this is an opportunity for us to share, learn from one another, and see what we can do to be more resilient ourselves and raise more resilient children. So just to highlight again, for building your own resilience, we talked a little bit about the 3 Ps, the personalization, that it's all my fault, pervasiveness, and then permanence. This is going to last forever. It's never going to get any better. And all those things can stand in the way of your resilience. We also want to build self-confidence, and compassion is a big part of that. That's something that people struggle with, having that compassion. It's a lot easier to have compassion for someone else than it is to have compassion for ourselves. Contribution. So what is it that you're doing each day that you did well, or something that you feel like you really made a difference in those 3 things each night before you go to bed? Just think about what they are. And if you have a day that the only things you can say are, today I made sure that there was a cup in my Keurig when I pushed the button, and I had, my shoes were tied and my clothes matched. You're going to have days like that, and that's okay. And those were the 3 things that you were able to do, and that's fine. Pay attention to joy. So what are those things in your life that bring you joy, and bring them back into your life? And if you're dealing after a loss with some joy that you associate with that person, bring it back slowly. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Lean into it and start bringing back joy a little bit at a time. Rely on those relationships and the people around you, and be able to say, I need help. That doesn't mean that you're weak at all. That means that we have other people to lean on for support. And then acknowledge the possibility of growth. Sometimes it's easy to focus on what you want your end result to be, but nobody gets there right away. You've got to remember that, you know, some days I just have to take 2 steps forward, and I might have a day where I take 1 step back, but but I'm going to grow every day a little bit. So those are ways to build your own resilience. They came from the Option B book, as well as the Option B website. And then, talking about building resilience in our children, they need to know, number one, they have some control over their lives. Number two, that you can learn from failure. That's not the end of everything. If you fail, it doesn't mean it's all over and I'm never going to get any better, but you can learn from it. What did we learn from something that didn't work out? You matter as a human being, and I think some of us outside of children need to know this. And this is a message that we're not great at accepting, but you matter as a human being. And you have strengths that you can rely on and that you can share with others. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Karen and Susan for our question and answer session.
All right, thank you so much, both Rachel and Abby. The first question on the chat is from Ellen. I'm interested in tips for building resilient grandchildren. Any suggestion unique for grandparents?
Sure. So the wonderful thing about grandparents is they can be that constant sense of positivity and support, right? Because if they're in a situation where they are the grandparent but they're not the caregiver, then it's a very different role than if the grandparent is the caregiver. So we kind of cover both of those things whenever we do our caregiver support groups. One of the studies that's talked about, it's actually talked about in Option B, and I heard about it whenever I was learning about resiliency in grad school. And it's the study that happened in 1955, and there's a pervasive amount of alcoholism on this island of Kauai in Hawaii. And many of these children are growing up in homes with parents who have alcoholism, at least one of them. And one of the big resiliency factors for these children to grow up and be successful was because they had one permanent grandparent or neighbor that was consistent, that was there for them, that always showed them love, and that was always able to help them whenever they needed something. So if it's a grandparent, I would say that you would always want to make sure that that child has a connection to you, that you're present in their life, and that you provide an opportunity to just feel love and attention without having to put expectations on the child. If the grandparent is the caregiver, then it's very much the same kind of interaction that we listed before, as letting the child know they can learn from mistakes, making sure that they feel that they are valuable, making sure that you kind of cover those other steps that we had for parents. And that kind of goes in with, I saw the other question about children who are in a broken home without guidance and support. Again, it's the same idea. So if we're able to check into the family and offer children that stability and permanence, we call it relationship permanence, that they have one person in their life that is connected with them, then that can be a huge resiliency factor, that they feel like they have other options. And again, that kind of goes back to control. And then the other opportunities that are available, like big sister, big brother. It's a positive role model that can meet with the child, take the child out if the family isn't able to do those things. And also there are some community after school programs that are available. And I think there's like an art and drama club that's available in New York. So there are some other things, but it would be tapping into their interests and their hobbies to get them out of the home and into spaces where they can exercise their strengths and share their strengths with others that would appreciate them.
Rachel, I know that in Option B, they talked about how you phrase your praise. I have a granddaughter, and I always say, good job, when she completes something. And then I thought, after reading or listening to Option B, I said to myself, I should be saying, wow, you really tried. Good, that was a good effort and you succeeded.
Sure.
And so just watching how you phrase things, I think is very important.
Yeah, and being very specific too, because a good job could be like, what was a good job? So you can say, I really appreciate how you were able to stand next to me in the grocery store. That was so safe. Good job. So, you're reinforcing the behavior that was really, important to you. So you can be very descriptive. And then, yes, focusing on the process, right? So you're working hard, you're trying hard, you're putting in effort. Those are the things that you would like the child to continue to do. Yeah. It's hard to remember. I do the same thing. I teach it, but it's kind of a habit.
Right, that's exactly right.
You guys did great.
I noticed that two of our attendees are talking about the 3 Ps, and one even wants to say, hey, how can I explain the 3 Ps to a 6-year-old child? Do you have any words of wisdom for that?
Yeah, I think exploring why each one isn't always the fact. So we want to look at, if they're personalizing something, what would they say to you if you had done that same behavior? They would say, oh, it's okay, we make mistakes. So how can they turn that compassion that they would give someone else to themselves and realize that we do all make mistakes and that this isn't our fault? And also for a child to realize that they really shouldn't be taking responsibility for adult things, right? So many times kids feel a responsibility for their parents or for a friend. And really we want to make sure that we let them know that we want them to be a child, and that it is not their responsibility, and that as adults, it's our responsibility to protect them and to help them. So I think there's 2 different ways you can kind of look at personalization. Permanence is showing small areas where things happened, but then got better. So it's always best with kids if there's like an example, right? So if they've gone through something, like you could talk about, you were nervous the first day of school, but then gradually every day after that, it got easier and easier. So things don't always feel this bad right away. Things can get a little bit easier to work through, and we learn a little bit more. So again, we're kind of introducing that growth process of how can I change my mindset? And we can teach that to kids. Kids can absolutely understand that. And there's a lot of growth mindset children activities that you can find. You can, they're on Pinterest, they're on Teachers Pay Teachers, and they're just little examples where you can help kids understand the growth mindset. So I think permanence would relate to that. And then pervasiveness. So this doesn't affect all areas of our life. So for a child, finding other areas that they can continue to enjoy and explore, like if it's their hobbies or things that help them feel calm, like coloring, there are ways that we can still feel calm and safe and in control if the rest of the world feels a little bit out of control.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people would like to share, but one of the questions that I thought we could talk about is that Sheryl writes in option B that we all live with some form of option B. And if you feel comfortable sharing your story, what option B are you now living? Does anybody have something they'd like to share?
I just want to take a second to share. You don't have to type in the chat box. If you would prefer to just share, you can unmute yourself and then speak with us as well. Either way, it's fine, whatever you prefer.
This is Karen. I do have something that I want to share. It's not personal, but a classmate of mine posts 3 things that he's grateful for every day. And I saw that Sheryl said that in the book, that she started doing that and how much it means to her to do that. I'm like, I look for his post every single day. Now I haven't started it yet, and maybe I'll start with one thing that I'm grateful for every day, but I just can't believe how many wonderful things that he sees on a daily basis. Small things, they're not big things. And the most amazing thing of all is that on his wife's birthday, she had a milestone birthday, her 70th birthday, he wrote 70 things about Jean that were just wonderful. I was just blown away. It was beautiful. So I'm going to try and follow his lead and start looking for 3 things that I value every day that I'm grateful for.
I think that's very uplifting. My option B is living without my husband. My husband passed away 6 years ago, of ALS, and not a day goes by that I don't miss him. And I will tell you, at the beginning, I would stick my foot out from under the covers, and I'm very faithful. And I would say to God, okay, God, I've gotten as far as I can go today. I need you to take me the rest of the way. And that he was able to do every day. So, taking those small steps is so important. My husband and I had also read a devotional by a minister who also was suffering from ALS. And this sort of piggybacks on what Karen just said. This particular gentleman would look for things to be thankful for all the time also. And one of the things was finding clean undershirts in his drawer. And, just something that simple can make somebody happy, and just, whittling things down to these little tiny things that we often take for granted. I think that brings hope and joy. So that's my option B.
I'm wondering if Rachel has any suggestions. I feel like even the very, very youngest children are very busy comparing themselves to others. And I think that, no matter how good you are at something, you're going to feel like you lack if you're too busy doing that comparison. So how would we, I work with children in the public. How would we, as the general part of the village, raising children, and as a grandparent and as a neighbor and as still a mother, even though my daughters are grown, like, how do we help people stop that constant comparison?
Right. And I think that's very natural, right? I think a lot of us do that. But instead of, one of the biggest things I do in my practice is we're not telling the kids what we don't want them to do. So we don't want to tell them, don't compare yourselves. We want to tell them what we want them to do. So what we would want them to do, instead of comparing to others, is compare ourselves to where we were a week ago. Compare ourselves to where we were a year ago. What is the progress that I am making in my journey, and how am I making a difference, and trying to reframe it to a point of, I am responsible for myself, and how can I help myself get better by comparing only to myself and where I was a year ago. So, and if they're having a hard time doing that, maybe you can help guide them through, I remember last year you couldn't reach, that to help me out, and you've been helping me out so much more now. And so now you're putting a language in place of, this is what I notice has changed in you and that I appreciate about you. And you can help kind of role model what that sounds like. So then their self-talk can start to be, oh, I did this and I got better, or I was here and now I'm here. Because they were also like, if we say, look at Johnny, they're not doing that. You're like, we're comparing as adults. So if we can find ways to change our language and find ways to introduce language that is more positive and focus on what you would want from them, they'll be more likely to be able to follow that path. And then that becomes their own self-talk and their own positive kind of reframe in their own mind.
I just want to add something to that. With my youngest not youngest anymore, with my young grandson, who is now 7, he would have a hard time wanting to do something that other people he was watching other kids do, and he was afraid to try it. And I would be like, well, that's okay, maybe when you're 8. And then it would just, all that worry would just go away, because then he wasn't feeling threatened anymore to have to do it. So.
Yeah, sometimes it can help kind of put in perspective where they are. And maybe there are some things that they can do because they're 6 and they're not 8. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely some positives to being 6 compared to 8. If it's the amount of homework you get, the amount of time you're in school, there's some positives. So you can kind of again, reflect to them what are some good things that they have, without trying to compare to others. It's a tough one. I mean, I know adults that do that, you know, and so it can be a tough one to break, and it's a constant one that can get modeled because adults could do the same thing. So it's, yeah, something to be very aware of when we're using our language and we're role modeling our language in front of kids.
Rachel, do you have any suggestions as far as self-talk goes? For people that are great at building others up, but have no self-worth and really struggle with that, you know, I have no problem saying this to someone else and know how important they are and how valued they are. But when it comes to myself, I really can't give myself that message. So what are some small things that we can do to get there?
Yeah, some small things you could do is act as though you're writing a letter to your friend, but really it's for yourself. So if there's an issue that you're going with, how would you respond to your friend if they came to you with that problem? What are some things that you would say to your best friend when they came to you and said, I don't like how I did on, you know, my my art project. Man, I did not do well. I did, you know, you would encourage them and you would say, oh, I think it was okay. You did this right and you did this right. And so in that way, we're at least introducing the language that they would use for a friend. And then we can talk about how do you use that for yourself? And so whenever then it has to be reflected inwards, it could be things like small steps of going back and reading that letter, but having it like kind of personalized. So you're going back and you're reading the letter that you would have given your friend, give your friend the same care that you would give yourself, and give yourself that same compassion. And then you're able to read that in kind of real time when you're going through that issue, especially if it's something that comes and goes. Like sometimes I feel really good about myself, sometimes I don't. So I'm gonna put this letter away when I'm feeling good about myself, and I'm gonna open it whenever I'm not feeling very good about myself. Especially if you do get moments where you're feeling positive, then you can write the letter then, because then you're thinking of all those things that are going well. And then the other thing, I'm trying to think, I just had something else in my mind and it's escaping me. But it's trying small moments of affirmation, like whenever Sheryl talked about 3 things I did today, right? It wasn't so much gratefulness, but it was the 3 things that I accomplished, right? So we're building ourselves by acknowledging that we have value in the things that we accomplished. And it starts out small with maybe I got the cup and the Keurig, but then it can build to maybe I helped my neighbor, or maybe I got a shower today, and that's not typical for me. So just kind of being able to step back and recognize those small victories and really be aware of them. Because sometimes too, we can get so caught into the idea of what's the next thing? Where am I going next? What am I doing next? And we're not really pausing and thinking about our progress. And so I think writing that at night and kind of reflecting that kind of helps put that habit of practice in our minds, and then we can build ourselves up that way.
Thank you.
There's a wonderful YouTube video of an admiral. Now I've got to look, I have it in the handout. So if people want to check this out later, it's Admiral McRaven, and he talks about changing the world by making your bed. And one of the things he says that no matter how your day goes, if you get up in the morning and you make your bed and you come home and you have a really lousy day, you come home to a freshly made bed. So it's a great video. It's his address to a graduating class at a college. And as I said, it is in the handout, but if you get a chance to watch that and hear him speak, it's phenomenal.
Okay.
I like that idea because it keeps it simple, right? These are
Right.
things that we can do. We don't need to set these huge goals for ourselves every day, because we all do kind of fluctuate with having good days and bad days. But if we all start it that way, I like that idea. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. So if you had one takeaway from this book that you'd like to share with another person, what would you share? What would you share? And everybody can have the opportunity to answer this question.
I think this book is kind of on the caliber of Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, you know, like just how everybody should have to work in a restaurant before they get to go eat at a restaurant. Everybody should listen to Blink before they go out into the world and judge. And I think option B is a good book that, you know, should be on everybody's list. I don't know how we convince them, tie them down and blast it or something, but I found it personally helpful.
Okay. Great. In the chat, someone just posted that there's a link to the resources that I had mentioned, but I believe everybody will get one, get the resource sheet in your email box. So, and Michelle says life can go on and it can be fulfilling and joyful. And I think, you know, if you hold on to that hope, that will be fulfilled. So that's a really nice comment. So anybody else have anything that really stood out that, you know, you would go ahead and share?
I have one thing that stayed with me in the book. Sheryl said that resilience is like a muscle that you can build. It comes from within, but it takes support from without. And to me, that's just like the perfect analogy of you can build on it, you can make it stronger, and you can become a stronger person. And that's just the tape that plays in my head from that book. I love it.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. I just learned that the wrong information sheet was sent out. So if you would like to see that information sheet, copy the URL that's in the chat, and it will also be on the York County Library's website, yorklibraries.org. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to share? Okay. We would like to thank Rachel for coming this evening and sharing information about being resilient and raising resilient kids, even being grandparents of resilient kids. And we thank you all for participating with us this evening. I'm asking if you would please take a few moments to give us some feedback by completing the survey about this summer read selection. You can find a survey at any of the local libraries and complete it at your local library, or you can find it on transforminghealth.org. And while you're at transforminghealth.org, you can enter to win an autographed copy of option B, and also register to attend WITF's A Summer Read Beyond the Pages. This is going to be a live virtual special event with authors Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant that will take place on Tuesday, September 29th at 7 p.m. This event is free and open to the public, but they are saying pre-registration is required. I invite you to share our programs with your family and friends and ask them to join us next week for a third program in this series. And it is entitled Resilience in the Face of Incarceration. So we look forward to hearing about that. So everybody stay safe, stay connected to your library, and good night. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye. Goodbye.